Wesatyahala, Ikata Ravnar with well health. I am Ravnar, or Raven, whichever you prefer. And in today's episode of Mimir's Well, I'm out and about. I figured that today I'd let you guys see a little bit of my daily life, where I'm at. Now, today's topic is about a poem from Norse tradition called Sigrdrifa. Now, in Old Norse tradition, for those who do not know, there's a body of poems that are considered sacred that are called the Eddas. And they are divided into two groups, two collections, well, two versions really. There's the older poetic Eddas, and then the newer prose Eddas. And these poems were originally oral traditions that were passed down for generations in Norse society. And then around 1,000, 1,100, maybe 1,200 years ago, something like that, somebody, we don't know who exactly, but somebody went ahead and gathered a ton of these poems and wrote them down and collected them into, the prose Edda, the poetic Edda collection. Then, later on, somebody, an Icelander who was, at least as far as we can tell, Christian in practice, went ahead and took the poetic Eddas and rewrote them in prose form. And of course, there are some differences between the collections. The prose Edda has some texts that are not found in the poetic Eddas and vice versa, stuff like that. But in either case, these poems are considered sacred. And as an example, just so you know a little bit more of what I'm talking about, the poem called Havamal or Havamal, which is very well known in the Norse pagan community today, which is the wisdom sayings of Odin, is the second of the poetic Eddas. It's the second one, the first being the Vorospa, which is the prophecy of the Cirrus. So now Sigurdrifa is one of the Eddic poems, and its name breaks down into two words. The name Sigurdrifa, which is a Valkyrie, whose name means victory driver, and Mal, which means sayings of wisdom, wise words, wise speech, basically. And the Sigurdrifa tells the story of when the warrior Sigurdur, who is known in the Volsunga saga as the one who slew the dragon Fafnir, is on a journey in the land of the Franks, and he comes across this unconscious warrior. Seeing that the warrior's armor has grafted to their skin, which of course indicates an emergency, Sigurdur, without even thinking, does the right thing, cuts open the armor and allows them to breathe, and then of course takes off their helmet, whereupon he sees that this warrior is a female. Now, as she breathes, she's able to wake up, and when she wakes up, she asks him, "Who are you?" And there's an introduction and such. And he asks her, "Who are you?" And at this point, she does something very interesting. She hands him a full drinking horn, a drinking horn filled with presumably mead. Doesn't matter. The point is that it's alcohol, most likely mead. And it's referred to as a memory draft. So she gives him a memory draft. He asks her, who are you? And her response is to give him a memory draft. Now, before we continue, I need to explain something here. There are multiple examples throughout Norse lore where drinking horns or drafts of mead given in drinking horns are used often by women for sorcerous or magical purposes. There are examples of women giving men drafts of forgetfulness, for example, where they've done something to the mead or the horn, or both, I guess, some form of magical practice or something along those lines, to make it so that when the person drank that mead or drank from that horn, it would induce forgetfulness or other things, right? There's also reference to the use of poison and things like that too. And so here Sigrdrifa, the Valkyrie, is offering Sigurdur a memory draft. It's the opposite of a draft of forgetfulness. In other words, what it means is that she's done something to the mead to give him memory. Which, by the way, is interesting because it allows us to speculate that it's possibly an indication that he might actually have already known who she was, that there's definitely something more to the story than that. Because otherwise, why would a memory draft be the appropriate response to him asking her who she is, right? But in either case, she gives him a memory draft, a reference to the magical practices connected to the drinking horns and mead. And before I continue, I would like to point out, this is one of the reasons why I've been trying to tell people that the craft of making drinking horns is, in fact, a form of magic in and of itself. I, as a drinking horn maker, am a magic practitioner. Now, what happens next is she, in stanzas, well, technically stanzas 2, 3, and 4, because in the English translations they organize the stanzas a little differently. But in stanzas 2, 3, and 4, she basically says something along the lines of, "I have been asleep for a very long time. Odin, put me to sleep." And then she states a prayer. And that prayer is known as Sigurdrifa's prayer. Now, the prayer is interesting. I'm not going to recite the prayer in this episode. I'm going to save that for the next episode. Well, actually, let's consider this part 1 of the Sigurdrifa episode, and then we'll consider the next episode part 2, and then that way, when you're done watching this one, you can know that the next one is already available. But she recites this prayer, and what's interesting about this prayer is not only is it one of the very rare occurrences of an actual straight up prayer, and even what is clearly as at least somewhat ritual practice being referenced in Norse mythology, but it's also a reference to what I've been telling people for a long time, that drinking horns are used in our religious practices. Because even though she's not the one drinking from the horn, you kind of get the feeling that the drinking from the horn is part of this practice, right? Like, she wakes up and she's already got a horn of mead prepared, you know, and she offers it to the person that broke the sleeping curse she was in. But this prayer is a prayer to Dagr. The first part of it basically translates as, "Hail Dagr, hail the sons of Dagr, hail night and her," well, people translate it as sister, but it could also be translated as niece, because the word is nieft, which in Old Saxon and Proto-Germanic was a word for niece, but I guess in Old Norse they used it for sister, apparently. But, hail Dagr, hail the sons of Dagr, hail night and her niece or sister. Basically, on this day, please grant us victory. And then the second verse goes something like, "Hail to the gods, hail to the goddesses, and to the generous earth. Please grant us healing hands throughout life." There's more to it than that, but that's more or less the gist of this prayer. So I won't show it in this episode or in this part of this episode. I'll show it in part 2, but I've made a drinking horn that actually has the first section of that prayer inscribed on it. And what I really want to say, really, in this video is that I view that as a very clear reference to a spiritual practice that we can and probably should implement in our daily lives, right? Because that's a full ritual, to wake up, to take a drinking horn, take a drink from that drinking horn, a memory draft, whether you're giving it to someone else or to yourself, doesn't matter. A memory draft, there's so much more that can be said about the concept of a memory draft too. And to recite a prayer, and that's a very positive prayer too, So Dagr is the god of the day. His name, Dagr, literally means day. The rune Dagas is named for Dagr. It's possible also, by the way, that he might be connected to the god Baldur, because in Proto-Germanic, the form of the word Baldur is actually Baldagr, or Baldair. In Old Saxon, it's Baldai or Baldair, so Baldagr, and it's possible that Dagr as a deity might have actually originally been one and the same as Baldur or Baldur, and that maybe somewhere along the lines of, when the Norse people were, migrating from Western Europe really, really early on into Scandinavia, they may have gone through some kind of a change or evolution within their version of the Germanic pantheon, and maybe a linguistic change where maybe Baldur or Baldair became split into two separate deities, possibly because you had multiple groups of Norse people that migrated into Scandinavia at separate times, at least according to theory, and they may have been temporarily, separated from each other. And you might have actually had something where one group might have actually just shortened the name baldur into dur or dagr, balm baldur. Okay, not dur. Anyways, that's a whole lot of complicated linguistic and historic stuff right there to get into. The main point is that there is a theory that Dagr, the god of the day, and Baldur, the god of light and the god of sun and vitality and youth and beauty, might have originally been one deity at one point. And that would actually make sense in the case of Sigrdrifa, because the story itself actually predates the Norse culture, right? It goes into Proto-Germanic origins, So in either case, I'm going to end this part of this episode with my main point, which is that I believe that this is a reference, one, to the fact that drinking horns are part of a whole form of magic in and of themselves. The making of drinking horns and the use of drinking horns, there's a whole form of magic that is centered on drinking horns. It's drinking horn magic. Drinking horns and alcohol. That this is a reference to that, and two is that this is very clearly a reference to what would probably be a really good, really mentally and emotionally and spiritually healthy practice, a daily practice, Even if you don't drink alcohol necessarily, wake up every day, take your horn, take a drink from it, get your body activated, get your mind activated, and greet the day with that prayer. It's such a positive prayer, and it sets an attitude of positivity for the whole day. It's a prayer of, victory and hope. Give us victory for the day, right? And give us healing hands throughout our lives. It's a beautiful prayer. And in part 2, I will get more into the specifics of that prayer. And before I go, take a second to check out my stuff. Ah. This is my new Hufa cap. And Hufa caps were traditionally worn underneath helmets. So, I'm so excited that I have this cool cap, and this of course is a drinking horn that I made, which by the way is for sale, $700 plus shipping, in case you're interested. But if you're interested in buying this drinking horn, please let me know in the comments section. Also, if you would like me to show off this drinking horn more in detail in a later video, comment, let me know. Thank you so much, and have a happy day. And feel free to message me if you have any questions, and look for part 2.